Good morning, everybody. My name is Ross Rowe. I'm the multimedia administrator for the village of Elk Grove Village, Illinois. And if you don't know where that is, it is at the end of runway 3 at O'Hare. So,
didn't you have a college bowl last year too?
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. So it's sort of my job to I run the government access channel here, and have for the last 18 years. Today's little session here, we're going to talk about capital. I think it was worded as capital equipment replacement, or more precisely about how folks should plan for future purchases. And by the way, it's not only for us today, it's not only the presentations, but we want to hear what you're doing, as well as asking questions. So we will have some presentations by a couple of great people. First of all, of course, I will have Lisa. If you could introduce yourself real quick.
Sure, definitely. I'm Lisa Wolf, formerly of Sun Prairie, now Columbus, Wisconsin. My presentation is going to be centered on the extremely small center, and also as a newbie coming into a leadership role here in Columbus.
Okay, thank you. And Jake Tim is our other speaker today. And Jake, can you introduce yourself real quick? Although I know everybody knows Jake, but
oh yeah, right. Yeah, my name is Jake Tim. I'm from Oshkosh Media, and similar to how I kind of did things last year when Ross and I were part of this, I'm just going to talk about we're kind of in the middle. We're not a big center. We're not as big as some, but we have multiple staff members, and we have kind of a different apparatus for how we replace capital equipment. We take part in the city's capital improvement program, which I know some of your municipalities have, some of you don't. But I think one of the things we heard last year was that people really appreciated hearing from 3 different people and 3 completely different ways for making capital purchases, which are those big dollar purchases that don't generally come out of your general fund or your operating budget.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let me jump into it here, and I will start by sharing my screen. Wait a minute. There we go. So anyway, like Jake said, a lot of you know that we did this at the last conference, and with some slight differences. It's the basics of this sort of thing never change. The first thing I always consider is, what is my capital budget purpose? Why do I have one in the first place? And it's to provide you with already produced material goods or any non-financial assets that are used in the production of goods or services. Or I guess I should have prefaced this with that old crutch. Webster's Dictionary defines capital budget as this. What does that mean? Well, it means, of course, the thing we always think of first is production equipment, cameras, monitors, tripods, everything you need to produce your programming. But it also means office equipment. It means computers, printers, copiers, modems, if you need them, telephone systems, everything you need to operate your center. It also includes transportation, trucks and vans, things you need to go out and do that voodoo that you do so well. And of course, construction, buildings, offices, studios, editing suites, things like that. And that's pretty much what my capital expenditure budget, how it works. Now, what determines the budget? Well, in my case, my mission determines it. According to us, our mission is to inform the residents and businesses of Elk Grove Village about municipal policies and operations, as well as being a historical archive for the community. Let me point out again that I am only a G. Okay, there isn't a public or an educational component in my particular system. So since one of the things we don't do is we don't loan out equipment to the public. But if you do loan it out, obviously that's a consideration that you need to think about. Now, my funding, I receive the full franchise fee from Comcast, plus the 1% PEG fee from AT&T, or the two providers in our community. That is by village ordinance. We're allowed to use up to 70% of that for operations. The rest of those funds are set aside for future capital purchases. So I always have a pool of money that I can use, although I can't use it the same year I get it. Stuff that has been previously saved, I'm allowed to use that for capital purchases. Now, Jake will talk about the fact that his capital purchases come through the capital replacement fund that for his city. But in my particular case, I don't have to do that. So things like buildings and so I have to, everything except buildings and every stuff will come out of the village's capital fund, and stuff specific to my department. Whew, having trouble with English today, folks. Things that are specific to my department, I have my own capital budget for those items. So what determines my capital budget? Well, of course, one of the biggest things I have to deal with right now is COVID-19. And that means I have to plan for accommodating those protocols. Mask, PPE, disinfectant, counter shields, cleaning materials for production and office areas move to the forefront of my budget. Now, again, the village has a crew who comes in several times a week, and they sanitize the offices. So I didn't have to specifically budget for that, but I did have to budget to buy things like disinfectant wipes and other things, other cleaning materials, and some shielding for dealing with members of the public. As for the staff itself, the way our facility is designed, we already have individual offices with doors. So I didn't really have to do a whole lot with that sort of thing. But I know that a lot of facilities are in a situation where you have cubicles rather than individual offices. And so you have to have that as a part of your planning. And I think one of the things that we'll see a change in is employee spaces and how those are separated. So that's something we'll have to deal with. We use a 5-year capital budget plan. I do my best to keep up on the current trends, checking with staff and colleagues to production and office needs, keeping a close eye on wear and tear items, cameras and tripods and things of that nature. I also, for example, one of the things that I did not budget for this particular year was webcams. We didn't have any webcams in our offices until this whole COVID-19 started. And then, you know, any of you who have tried to get webcams between April and about August, it was pretty hard to do. So, but that was something that we felt was important, especially because several of the programs that we did, we used either Zoom or GoToMeeting or WebEx to record those interview shows. And it's only recently that we're looking at bringing people back into the studio. And even then, we had to clean out the studio and set up things so there would be social distancing. In the case of our village board coverage, our mayor refused to do Zoom. I don't know if any of you remember me ever talking about this before, but my mayor, the mayor of our city, doesn't even own a cell phone and barely uses email, and he's proud of it. So we had to reassess how we were going to, we had to distance everybody and had to reassess how we were going to do those meetings. And so in planning for next year's budget, that's something that's become a big thing for us, is to accommodate those things. I usually work off a schedule where I replace, for example, cameras every 5 to 7 years, depending on their usage. Recording devices, same thing, 5 years on the average. Tripods, you can usually wait a little longer. Switchers, the same thing. Edit systems, we replace those every 5 years, sort of in line with our office computers. And then vehicles, we plan for 10 years, but the village tends to set its vehicles based on how much usage they get, how much mileage they get. You know, we replaced a Suburban that we had a couple of years ago, and the village had it for 22 years. But because we never took it out of town, you know, they waited until it reached 60,000 miles. So that works that way too. Office equipment also has to be replaced, of course. As I said, computers, we usually repurpose them every 5 years. Printers 5 to 7, copiers 8 to 10. Phone system actually is I have that in there, but that's something I don't have to worry about. That's something the village does. Cell phones, usually the length of the contract, which usually about 3 years, same for hotspots. And the furniture, basically, we use it until it breaks. And then, but I try to keep a little money aside for that. And that includes set pieces. So that's pretty much how we're set up here. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can send me an email. You can also check out our website at eg-tv.org, our on-demand site at egtv.vibet.com. So with that, I will unshare my screen, and I will turn this over to Jake, who will talk about his operation.
Sure. Thanks, Ross. I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm going to keep mine somewhat brief. Thank you, Ross, for just giving the definitions and going through just the nuts and bolts of what capital purchases actually are. So I'm going to juxtapose against what Ross had to say and give you kind of what we do here. And then we'll have Lisa talk for a bit, and then we'll leave some time for some questions at the end, obviously, as well. So again, I'm from Oshkosh Media, City of Oshkosh. And Ross mentioned, and I think this is important to mention the way that we do things here so you can get an idea, that he receives the full PEG fee. We receive roughly 40%. We are fully funded by the PEG fee. Our entire budget is franchise fees. I should say that in the state of Wisconsin, there is no PEG fee. So we receive our entire budget from franchise fees, video service provider fees. But that's roughly make up roughly 40% of that. The rest of the video service provider fees go into the general fund in the budget for the city. So what do we do as far as capital purchases here in Oshkosh? Like Ross mentioned, the city of Oshkosh has what's called the Capital Improvement Program, which is roughly $10 million of borrowing per year. And I would say $9 to $9.5 million of that goes to the Department of Public Works. And then the rest of it is every other department, long-term big money projects that goes through an approval process. Every project that you want in the capital improvement program gets submitted, and then it goes through a scoring process with our purchasing department. And then at the annual all-day budget meetings, which I'm sure many of you have had to sit through before for your municipalities, they basically go down the line and say, what is our appetite for borrowing this year and what makes the cut? If something gets scored, say a roof goes out and there's nothing in the roof fund, the score obviously goes up for that. We've had projects get kicked down the road 2 years, 3 years because it's more of a want than a need. But if you don't get those are 5-year plans that we have here. So if you don't get that into the plan, a lot of times it's difficult to say, well, I need to borrow for this next year. And council will say, well, next year's jam-packed, but 2022 right now is pretty open, so let's put it in there. So it takes some advanced planning from us, some foresight to see, what is it that we're going to need to purchase down the line. Another difference between us and Elk Grove, Ross is responsible for replacing a lot of stuff that we are not responsible for replacing. So computers, for instance. Our IT department has a rotation where workstations at our 3 desk stations are replaced on a rotation. We don't have to worry about phones. We don't have to worry about computers. We don't have to worry about furniture, chairs, save for our set in our studio. A lot of that stuff, I don't consider that. I tell facilities, we need, this chair is broken, they get a new chair. I tell IT, this computer is old, it's not working anymore. They cycle it out if they have one for us. So, that's another difference. Some of the stuff that we have replaced with the capital improvement program, we do use that. We got a new van a couple of years back. The one that we had was really old, and we had that in the plan, so that came through. We have used our capital improvement program to replace all of the switchers, cameras, everything, all the guts of everything at all of our government meeting locations, our studio, our control room, and master control. That's all been done in the last 5 years, and that's all been done out of the capital improvement program. And my good buddy Andy Radig did all of the budget work before he left for UWO. So I didn't have to ask for a thing. I just got a bag of money dropped in my lap every year. And got to do the fun part of buying everything and then installing it. So, but that's kind of the process that we go through here. The one thing I will say about this process that is starting to worry me a little bit is that you used to buy AV gear and it used to last 10, 12 years. All of the old analog gear. I mean, we got stuff that's been sitting in cold storage for 3 or 4 Wisconsin winters. I'm willing to bet if I brought it back inside now and turned it on, it would fire right up and it would work just fine. That is not the case with computers. And everything that we buy nowadays is a computer, from the cameras to your switchers to everything. Just like cars, old cars used to run a lot longer, and newer cars can be somewhat computer electric based, and you have a lot more issues with that kind of stuff. So one thing that our IT department did was they took themselves out of the city CIP program, and they went to a model very much similar to Ross's, where they just assign X amount of dollars to rotate through and say, this is the amount of money we have to replace computers this year. These are the 25 computers that are on the list to be replaced because they're 5 years old, and they just go with it. I would love to get us, now that we have kind of replaced just about every aspect of our operation here, on the next cycle, I would really like to get us on a plan more similar to Ross's, because from a financial accountability standpoint, I don't always feel comfortable issuing a 10-year bond, which is what generally our CIP program is, borrowing over 10 years for a switcher or a camera that's going to last 5, maybe 6 years. For us, we still have the gear in our hands, and if you're, from a gear standpoint, it is what it is. You know, we're able to make these big upgrades, and that's great. But when you're thinking about your budget, it's hard to go back to the council in 5 or 6 years and say we need to get back in the CIP, and from someone who's on long range finance committee or someone who is kind of a budget hawk will look and say, didn't we just do this 5 or 6 years ago? These are supposed to be 10-year, this is essentially a 10-year loan. So it's the same idea of, you take out a 5-year loan on your car and then it dies in the 3rd year. You're not absolved of that cost. You're still paying it, and the taxpayer is still paying that. And we pay a lot in debt service. That's a big item in the general fund every year. So that's kind of how we do things here, and that is one of the things that I would like to I would honestly like to get away from and go more toward Ross's model, which is why I was interested in doing this again this year, because I learned a lot last year actually just being on the panel. But I wanted to at least offer one of the ways that we do things here and the process that we go through, because I know every place is different. And if you're interested in exploring your city's CIP program, if they have one, I'd be happy to offer any more insight on that. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Lisa so she can talk about Columbus.
Columbus. Yes. Thanks, Jake and Ross. Wow. I'm finding that more and more of my situation in every aspect is drastically different than each of yours. So I guess I will give a little bit of background about my situation so you can understand better why I'm doing things the way I'm doing them. This is the small station example. And by small, I mean I'm the only staff person. I am hiring someone next year to help me cover meetings, so that would be nice. But right now, I'm the media coordinator for the city of Columbus. So that means I'm about 55% cable, and then I also do work for the city website and social media and the Tourism Commission. So I wear a couple different hats. There are benefits and disadvantages to that relate to capital improvement. Some of the benefits are that obviously, if I'm doing social media, it would stand to reason that some of my gear can be paid for by budgets other than cable, just as an example. So that's essentially what Columbus Cable is. We don't have a studio. So we're very small operation. I'm sitting in my office right here, and I'm just like packed in and surrounded by server racks and TriCaster and all this other stuff. So it's just little tiny. And our primary function right now is government meetings. We do we take in some church programming because that's really important to our residents. And I'm starting to collaborate with a couple of other city departments and offer other types of programming, some library programming, some recreation, things like that. So there's Columbus Cable in a nutshell. We're in a season of change here in the city. Not the least of which I think in the last year we've gotten a new city administrator, a new public works person, which we're now hiring another one, and a whole bunch of other new staff, including myself within the last 2. I think I'm about 18 months in now. So brand new position. Before this, the cable was run by a contractor who did a great job. But they decided to just kind of go a different route and hire a full-time person. So that's another factor in my budgeting. When I got here, I realized that things were kind of in a state of everything needed to be upgraded all at once, except for just a few pieces of really, really nice gear that I was lucky enough to have that are aging a little bit. So I kind of took a look at everything that I had and prioritized. And last year, one of the things that two major upgrades happened here. We got a broadcast system upgrade, which shout out to Cablecast. I see Randy is in here. We got a new Cablecast system. And new council chambers equipment. We had been dealing with hay already. Since that's our primary mission, that's the thing that the city of Columbus really stresses that Columbus Cable needs to provide. I didn't feel it was right for us to be operating with the equipment that we had. It was really old standard definition PTZ cameras and this Vadio switcher, no character generator. So that was kind of the first thing to upgrade. This is kind of all well, not exactly having much of an equipment budget, a capital budget. So all of these things came from fund balance. We had to kind of give a special presentation to council and get these two upgrades passed. But they were, and now we're operating with a brand new Cablecast system, and we've got our new TriCaster Mini and NDI cameras. Great situation. So for the future, I've been taking stock of equipment, what I have, and what I think that our needs might be in the future, and it's kind of changing a lot. I've decided to take a little bit of a different angle on it since I'm the only staff person. I only have about 20 hours a week to commit to getting as much quality programming on the stations as I can. So this year I decided to go with some checkout kits, and they haven't been bought yet. It was just before COVID hit that I was sort of gathering together all the information. I knew exactly what I was going to get. And then, life got crazy. So those are on hold, but they are going to be purchased in 2020. Excuse me. And like Ross was saying, I've been starting to figure out what needs to be replaced by the age of all the equipment. I've got right now one Canon EOS. It's a 5D Mark III. I just looked at it recently, and a Panasonic camcorder, and then just a couple of other things. I have one tripod, one wireless lav kit that is also new this year, and one editing station, which I'm actually talking to you on right now, my iMac. So just kind of trying to take a look at those things, and they are all right around the 5-year mark. So determining which one to replace first. For 2021, I have actually decided to not replace anything yet. And like I said, take a little bit of a different spin on it. I've decided to get a really high quality smartphone for as a combined piece of equipment for tourism and city website and cable. So everyone is pitching in a little bit for that. And it's going to be used for more last minute filming opportunities. We are doing a lot more short form video as opposed to long form shows, as I'm sure you can imagine, just with everything I've said before. So that's going to be my big thing this year. In terms of numbers, I can kind of give you a little bit of information as to what my budget is and how it gets divided up. And I'm looking at about $18,000 for my capital budget this year, and not all of that is phone, of course. I am going to be doing a little bit of a council chambers upgrade again in terms of our audio system. We have it's audio over IP. It's a Shure central control unit and some really nice microphones. We do need a few things yet in terms of audio, and the presentation equipment in the council chambers is aging as well. So going with probably a new flat screen TV out in the council chambers for viewing in the audience, and as well as some either tablets or monitors for the council people to view PowerPoints and Zoom on. I have been doing hybrid Zoom meetings this whole time, and it's a pretty basic setup for now, but we're also considering some upgrades for that as well in 2021. I guess that's about it for me. If you have any questions, let me know. I know that going into this, it's a little bit confusing if you're new, if anyone else is in the same position that I am. This is my second time through a budget cycle. And I know that every city does it differently. So if I skipped anything, let me know. Randy.
This is a great conversation I have with customers all the time. And one thing I'd like to just put on the table is how much of the capital expenses are now shifting towards cloud-based services, and how that may impact our planning going forward for capital budgets. I'm my little town. I'm the chair of the Cable Advisory Committee, and we're having this discussion right now in regards to our franchise negotiations and whether or not we can ask for support for things like cloud services that allow us to distribute this content, and whether that is defined as capital or not. Obviously, cable industry has their own opinion on that, but this is an important topic that we need to be talking about.
Well, in my case, the village here doesn't consider it capital; it considers it operational.
Right.
So it comes out of my operating budget.
We did. Oh, sorry, Ross. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say when we purchased when we upgraded through Telview a couple of years back, we built in several years of streaming and other cloud services into that capital contract because we had room in the budget. Now the chickens are eventually coming home to roost on that with an annual subscription. So then that's a perfect point, Randy. How do you go about it? You're in Maine, right?
Yes.
So I assume you guys still have the ability as a municipality then to negotiate your own franchise.
Yeah, we're in the middle of. I think we've got 12 towns working as a group to negotiate upgrade our franchise. 25 years old, believe it or not.
Yeah. So, in Wisconsin, we don't have that ability, obviously, to negotiate as municipalities as the state negotiates the franchise. But yeah, I know I 100% agree with the sentiment that how do you, and this is just going to continue to come down the line. Everything we're doing right now, much to the point I was trying to make before about how everything's a computer. Well, every computer needs a service agreement, and every computer needs maintenance, and how do you go about that? Do you build that into your operating budget and just, your council then just takes that on as part of the
and there's so
general
many, right. There's so many unknowns. One of the issues we're negotiating at the state level with the NCTA over this legal proceeding that we have in the state of Maine has to do with providing HD channels. It's law now in the state of Maine, and we're trying to hold the industry accountable to providing those channels. Their reaction's been, sure, we'll do this. Let us know when our techs can come over, do a site survey, and we'll give you an estimate on what the cost will be to make this happen. And now we're getting into the weeds on language having to do with things like where does the cable company take responsibility for delivering, these channels? Is it start at the modulator, or does it start somewhere beyond the modulator? And how does that change with broadband and streaming services? These are big issues that we really need to start talking about and trying to help define in the public sector, which is what we're doing in the state of Maine. And it's difficult because most people aren't capable of having those discussions. It's a technical discussion.
Yeah, and in the state of Wisconsin, we're fighting. We're in the infancy stages of fighting that fight that it sounds like you've maybe made some progress on. So I'm very interested to hear how that, because just like water main laterals and anything else, the homeowner owns out to the sidewalk or the road, and then it's the city's responsibility. So it's the same thing if you look at it from an infrastructure
I imagine they're talking about this right now in the other group on their public policy. This is a public policy issue, but
Yeah.
my experience is in both the public policy arena and the engineering arena is that the two interface all the time. You're constantly having discussions about technical issues with public policy wonks who have no concept of what you're talking about. And they're so far back from where you're at. It's like you got to really start by educating people and talking about what we mean by cloud, distribution.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. We've got a couple minutes left. I wanted to see if there were any other questions or thoughts or anybody else wants to chime in about what we've been talking about so far. Okay.
Ross, there's just one other thing that I do want to mention because
All right.
I didn't mention this, but I alluded to it earlier. As far as CARES funding goes, from the federal government to the state to the municipalities, there is money available, depending on how your municipality has gone about spending this, for you to make purchases that would affect your ability to cover government meetings or your ability to operate. I'll give for instance. I think I had mentioned this earlier in a different meeting. We needed some more microphones for one of our conference rooms because we were dragging microphones back and forth and back and forth. So we went to our finance department and we said, is there any possible way that we could use some of the CARES money to get some more microphones? This is for government meeting coverage. We're having to do things differently because of COVID-19. So if you can make, now our finance director is willing to work with us on a lot of that stuff. Depending on your finance department and your administration, it could be different for you. But don't be afraid to explore that as an opportunity because there are funds available that are not going to come out of your general fund. If that hasn't already been used up on other projects, that was one avenue that we went. So that's in the short term. Now it has to be, from my understanding, it has to be something that wasn't budgeted for before, and it has to have some kind of tie to you were affected by the pandemic and you are now responding to that with this purchase. So keep that in mind.
Did you have to make that argument narratively, or how was that justified?
I'm very lucky to have a finance director who supports us too. I walked in there and to my supervisor's office and said, we're dragging these microphones all over the place. It's making it really hard to go between meetings, and it's putting a lot more wear and tear on these microphones we just purchased. You think it would be possible for us to get 4 to 6, more microphones? So they're sure gooseneck microphones. They're not cheap microphones. And he was like, yeah, that seems, you're having to do more meetings because of COVID. That's a direct connection. Let's go talk to Russ, the finance director. And we were lucky that he was like, yeah, of course, this makes total sense. So
is that
okay? I have to interrupt because we have run out of time.
Sorry, Randy.
Sorry, Randy, but I want to thank Lisa and Jake, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. If you want, Randy and I are going to be in a session at 11 o'clock about where we're going to talk about live streaming. Please join us. And thanks, everybody. And I will, I guess, Boyce, are you going to switch us over, or is Deb coming back? Or I don't know how that works, but you're muted, dude.
Yeah, I think at some point it'll just happen.
Oh, okay.
Or Deb will have to kill it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Deb will eject us. Randy, do you want to finish while we're still in here? Do you want to try and finish your point real quick?
I think maybe I'll just connect with you, Jake, because I'm very curious as to how this worked. And so you're saying that you did, in fact, you were able to make that purchase through using those COVID funds?
They're here. Yep, we have the microphones. They're here.
Very impressive. Thank you.
Good.